Hello and welcome to the agenda on Labour Social. I'm Graham Hughes. I'm joined by Phil Moorhouse as always. And this week we're going to be talking about the Labour Party conference, which we both attended this year. Have you ever been to a conference before? Was that your first or? Phil, can you hear me?
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh no. I was just asking, was that your first conference that you've been to?
No, it's the first one I've been to in Liverpool. I was
Oh,
actually
right, okay.
one taxi driver asked me if I've been to Liverpool before. So I said I've been through Liverpool on my way to Ireland, but it's the first time I've been to Liverpool as a destination.
But what about conferences? Have you been to Labour
I've been to a
Party
couple in Brighton.
Oh, okay. So, but yeah, what do you think of Liverpool? I don't think you saw very much of it, but is it all right?
I saw a
Better than
lot more
Doncaster?
of it than I should have done because I kept getting lost. But yeah, transport not ideal. But then again, I'm judging it when there's like a crap load of extra people in the city.
Yeah.
But I'm
And
also
you don't have Uber, do you?
I
So
won't use Uber. I refuse to use Uber.
it must be so annoying though, seeing like people just getting in a taxi and going straight away, and you're waiting there for an hour.
The thing is, I found out. I was saying to my partner's eldest that because she rescued me from Doncaster when the train was cancelled. And it was, I was saying I actually could have driven. My plan was to drive, but I couldn't find a hotel that could guarantee parking. It's always like, oh, well, there's car parks about. It's like, yeah, that's good. But actually, opposite where I was, there was on-street parking, but it was always empty. So I could have driven. And then she was saying, oh, no, you're still better off because in Liverpool, and I can't attest it, I've never driven in Liverpool. You probably could. It's like you take one wrong turn and then it's 30 minutes onto your journey because of the nature of the ring road. Because everything's one way. But I said, my attitude to that would be not take the wrong turn.
Yeah. Well, I think in the era of sat nav, it's not quite that bad.
Yeah.
But where the conference was being held there's loads of car parks there. So and it's easy to get to because it's you don't have to go through the city centre to get there. You can attack it from either side.
I wish I'd driven is basically what I'm saying. But I didn't know in advance that there would be reliable parking.
Ah, right. Fair enough. So let's talk about the actual conference itself. You got there on the Monday, didn't you? But I was there on the Sunday morning. I got there and watched a few talks, watched a few speeches by Labour politicians, and we did our own couple of shows. One inside the venue on the Tuesday, and one outside of the venue at a place called the Camp of Fairness. Thank you to everyone who came along and everyone who watched it live. Sorry, the sound wasn't particularly good. When we do the next one, the sound is going to come out of the mixing desk, and it's going to be wonderful. That's my plan. I'm going to buy myself a really, really, really long mini jack cable.
Yeah.
So what was
audio is always the trick, isn't it?
Mini jack cable, really long mini jack cable. Anyway, so have you watched any of the speeches, or have you read the transcripts of the speeches?
I have, yeah. So I've gone through a few now. Yeah.
And what were particularly standout moments for you?
Well, so for me, quite clearly, they doing exactly what I told them to at the weekend, which was to order an inquiry into HS2.
They've been watching
I also
channel,
like the idea of this COVID fraud commission, which is sort of the same thing and does the same jobs, which is to recoup money and potentially imprison some Tories. It's quite funny. I saw some Tory shill on Twitter talking about, Starmer's record is blah, 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 some bollocks. And I said, now I'll tell you what Starmer's record is, mate. It's putting corrupt Tories in prison. This HS2 inquiry and COVID commission might be interesting.
So they're doing two. They're doing one into COVID and one into HS2.
It's like different. I mean, the HS2 will be a public inquiry, full public inquiry, like we have with the COVID inquiry now. The COVID fraud commission is all about just recouping the money that was defrauded that Rishi Sunak has written off. But at the same time, it's like the HS2 inquiry. I can't know it will uncover criminal offences. It may or may not. But it will certainly uncover dodgy dealing on the part of because there's some we already know about. It's just that the general public don't. Yeah. But there's bound to be much more uncovered. So it should absolutely destroy the Conservatives' reputation, at least for a while.
Yes,
until they can have a change of personnel. But the commission, there's a reason why Sunak is writing it off. It's not because the Tories don't want a few extra billion right now. Of course they do. They want to pay for tax cuts. They'd love to have a few extra billion, and all they have to do is let HMRC hire a few extra people and go after them, and they would get some money. The reason they don't want to is because they know full well that some of the people caught in that net will be people known, including potentially Rishi's son ex-wife, because there was anyone who there was a lot of businesses who basically claimed on the furlough thing that they had employees that they didn't. And there wasn't really a lot of checks going on.
Right.
And also loans, companies that were getting these COVID loans, like, even, and it's not hindsight, Labour at the time said you need to be doing some due diligence here. Like there were other countries that were, of course, propping up businesses, but they made sure those businesses had to be registered for tax purposes in that, like Germany did it. It's like if the German government were giving out any like COVID loans of their own or grants or whatever, that business had to be registered for tax purposes in Germany.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of businesses
didn't do that in this country.
Are not.
I know people set up, didn't they? They set up businesses. They were supposed to be established businesses. People set their business up, and then applied for money off the government, and they got it. Yeah. And it was like, so how long have you been in business? Oh, yeah, 2-3 years. And it happens.
And surprisingly, since those businesses now gone under, or with some businesses, there were ones that were going to go under anyway before even COVID hit. And they said, oh, we'll use this money to just keep filling the coffers for a bit and then go under afterwards. So there's a lot of stuff that we didn't get value for public money on.
I think
that commission should be able to go through.
It's a testament to just how much the Tories don't care. It is just a party of people who do not give a shit about anything. Like I'm all right, Jack. It is the party of I'm all right, Jack. But no, I felt like the conference went really well. I got to meet Jonathan Ashworth, got to meet Wes Streeting, Jonathan Reynolds, a few others, Jess Phillips, and one of the things that came across was just that everyone was sort of jubilant to some extent that this was possibly going to be the last Labour conference with them in opposition, but no one wanted to say it. And I thought it was really telling that when Keir Starmer was introduced onto the stage, they didn't say, "Here's our next Prime Minister." Yeah, which they normally do. They said, "It's the leader of our party, Sir Keir Starmer." Yeah. Before he got glittered for some reason, which was. Were you watching that live at the time?
No, I never watch these things live. As I say, I always catch up with them afterwards. I prefer to read them if I can get a transcript. But I watch them.
You were at the conference.
Yeah, but I was also my feet were wrecked. Yeah. And I was trying to get to where I needed to get with as little walking as possible. I cannot tell you if the way I describe it. Okay, the backs of my heels basically have no skin, and on the outer bits of my toes, there's a lot of not skin there, and then. I managed to make a massive wound yesterday because on the outside of my left toe, my left little toe, I banged it on a chair yesterday. It massively opened the wound. So basically, my feet are wrecked.
I get really squeamish about stuff like this.
Yeah, so I won't take a photo and show you.
No, please do not.
No, I won't. But my feet are completely wrecked, and I have to go out this evening. So I'll be packing, and I had to go out yesterday as well. So I'll be packing them in lots of cotton wool.
Yes,
and putting them into more comfortable shoes.
Okay, and next time, let me know. Let me know what shoe size you are, and I will go into town and I will buy you a pair of trainers.
I've got shoes.
I will buy you a pair.
The lesson learned is make sure. So what I will be doing, just to make absolutely certain, if I happen to have any new shoes around about the time, will be to go around the Yorkshire Wildlife Park. You can easily do 10,000 steps there, just to make sure it's fine. Don't you worry. It's all I learn lessons. I sometimes have to learn them the hard way in the painful way, but I do learn them.
Okay, good. Di is the same as me, saying too much detail, Phil. Yeah. For the squeamish out there, I apologize. Because I get it. That's why I could never be a doctor. But so in Starmer's speech, there wasn't much new stuff in there. No. I felt he reiterated the whole thing about Britain's power, Great British Energy. But this 1.5 million new homes, and how is he going to achieve that? He's like, well, we're gonna stick it to the NIMBYs.
Yeah,
I'm going to be a
including
YIMBY.
Tory MP NIMBYs.
Yes, and just build stuff where we can.
Yeah.
What other stuff? I mean, that would be a bit more concrete. I was kind of a bit surprised that there wasn't a bit more sort of a bolder vision, considering we're this close to the election.
But that is their strategy. They've made that clear. Their strategy, they keep saying, is to underpromise and overdeliver. At the moment, like people can say, "Oh, they need the grand vision. They need grand vision," because they're thinking of 1997, where they did need the grand vision, because the John Major government, like John Major himself, was like, it was very much linked with Black Wednesday, but at the same time, he was considered basically honest in a cabinet of rogues, and his government was considered sort of competent. So you had to have that grand vision of, yeah, but they're just stagnating. We can do loads better. They don't have to have that now. They just have to say we're going to make things work. Like Tony Blair wouldn't have got away with that, but Keir Starmer not only he is getting away with it, and the thing is as well. Everyone keeps saying that they'll struggle. So yeah, so why hype things up too much? Why not let people think what they're voting for is things to just basically work? And then when they get a lot better, they go, "Oh, this is even better. Yeah, we'll absolutely vote for this again." So that is a clear strategy, because there are reforms that they're talking about, like, even something as, but if people aren't, if they're wary about the grand vision after the last two grand visions were leveling up and Brexit, what's happened to them?
Yeah.
So if if people are sort of sick of that, and Labour are, like, they've extended their lead again. The YouGov polls just come out, and Labour, according to them, have got a 23-point lead over the Tories again.
Wow.
There's other
That's what it
polls
was last year. This time last year, when Trush was spontaneously combusting. That was 20. It got up to 23, didn't it?
I got way higher than that. Like at its peak, let's have a look. Labour were on 56, and at the same time, the Conservatives were on 19. They had like a 37-point lead during the height of Truss's triumph.
John Mortar saying in the chat, Starmer should not promise much. His strategy is right so far, if you ask me. I get that. Yeah, okay.
The polls show it. I mean, like that. The polling, unless they're all getting it badly wrong, that is what the polling is indicating. We're going to have 2 by-elections next week. That'll be interesting. So there's absolutely no need to if it started going south, if it all started going wrong, then yes, he's going to have to lean more on the big grand vision again. But at the moment, you wouldn't. It's better to offer as little as possible and then over deliver.
Plum Duff says, "Where the hell has Sunak disappeared to? He's at the leadership skills of a jar of pickle." That's true as well, especially given international events this week in Israel, Palestine. Like, where has he been? Where has he made a statement? Has anyone asked him?
No, I mean, James Cleverly was sent off. The last we saw of Rishi Sunak, as far as I know, and obviously I missed some news this week,
jollies.
He was breaking convention again on Monday. He did one of his PM Connect things on Monday, and it's like a bit of a convention. You don't shit on other parties' conferences, so when they've got their conference on, you don't put any events on. So he's trying to play he's trying to play dirty, isn't he? He's trying to play the street fighter in the gutter. He's just very bad at it. So, he was there at Curry's doing one of his PM Connect things, where, by the way, what he does, it's like he's supposed to be meeting voters, but he doesn't meet voters in a normal environment. He goes to a workplace. So then it's like everyone gets told by their line manager, "You've got to go and sit and listen to this dickhead," right? And they're obviously not going to be misbehave because their bosses are there. So he's got a captive audience, but he can claim they're ordinary people. They are ordinary people, but not in an ordinary environment where they feel that they can ask awkward questions or tell him he's talking shit.
Well, Plum Duff saying wars, infrastructure collapsing, hospital waiting lists, Sunak missing in action. And Michael's saying Parliament should have been recalled over what's happening. But I think it's back in on Monday, isn't it? Does it start again on Monday?
It's back next week. Yeah, the SNP are having their conference, and then that's it. The Parliament's back next week.
When's the state opening? Do you know?
So they're proroguing Parliament from the 26th of October, and I gather the new session will begin on the 7th of November.
Right.
So basically, what's going to happen is we've got next week, we've got the by-elections, then we've sort of got the following week, And then Rishi Sunak's been party leader for a year, so it's almost like, oh, so then potentially confidence vote could happen. Oh, we're going to prorogue Parliament at that point for a couple of weeks.
Can they do that?
Oh yeah, I mean, this is perfectly valid. Like the reason why Johnson's prorogation was declared unlawful was because of the reasons. He didn't have a good reason for prorogating. This there's a perfectly valid reason. New session of Parliament, and it's always understood. Of course, the government will choose timing in their favour. That's fine. You know, what matters is there a good reason to prorogue it? Yes, new session of Parliament, because their current legislative programme is sort of done. They need to announce the next one.
Right. Okay. So yeah, sometime in November. So at the moment, when they go back next week, that's just going to be to clear or finish off any bills that still need to be.
Yeah, they're doing hardly anything at the moment. Like Parliament's been finishing in like 2:30 in the afternoon, stupid stuff like that. Right. There'll be a PM. We'll get another couple of. We'll get a PM Hughes. We should get a PM Hughes unless he pisses off somewhere after the by-elections. You know, if they lose Tamworth and Mid Bedfordshire, then Sunak's going to have some questions to answer.
Well, I mean,
but that is very.
He's got questions to answer just looking at the polls. I mean, the only thing that he could get a little bit of, I'm doing all right from is the Uxbridge result. And that was skewed because, as you keep pointing out, people didn't realise that ULEZ wouldn't affect them.
Yeah.
And
that's old news anyway.
I mean, I'm not in London, but obviously I had to look at stuff. Our car that we sold, and we were trying to sell it last month, and one of the problems was we were thinking, because it's slightly older, an older car, we might not be able to say it's ULEZ compliant. So we looked it up, and even though it came out earlier as a diesel, even though it came out a few years earlier than the cut-off date, I think it's 2015 for diesel, it was still compliant. It was still compliant. So. I mean, yeah, that sort of thing, it's not going to happen again. I think they're going to lose Uxbridge in the general election.
Oh, yeah.
What do you reckon about Hartlepool? Do you reckon that's going to go back to Labour?
I do. It is one of those that is going to go back to the Conservatives at some point, but Labour will get it at the next. Just because I don't think there's a single red wall seat that won't go back to Labour. It's just that some of them are not really red wall anymore. Hartlepool is now going to be basically Conservative. It's just that. Anything that might have been considered a marginal at the last election is just going to go Labour, or Lib Dem, I suppose, depending on which one was the target one. But once people have got used to Labour a bit, then I think just the demographics are going to swing it back to the Conservatives.
Yeah, and just to mention the glitter man for a moment, because. I was really expecting it to be just Stop Oil, and it wasn't. It was a guy who wanted PR. And
do you know what? It was worse than that. It was stupider than that when I found out some more details. So he was formerly a protester for Extinction Rebellion before they decided those stunts weren't helping them. And so people pointed out in the comments on the video I did on it. So you've basically got this person who was campaigning on environmental thoughts, and he was using glitter, one of the most damaging things for the environment you can use. Like microplastics. It's not a good look. But again, it's this sort of person, it's this sort of idiot, that doesn't understand how to win a campaign. They just want to. I don't know what they want to do. He just wants to bum around and say to his parents, "Oh, can you bankroll me?" But I'm not sitting at home eating Watsits or anything. I'm doing serious work. And it's like, no, you're not.
He did sound rather posh.
Of course he was. It's in his 20s and he's not working. Of course he's been bankrolled by his parents.
Have you got noise in the background there, Phil?
Sorry, the vacuum. Someone's doing vacuuming.
Oh, okay.
No one has any respect for my streaming schedule.
No. Well, I was doing Morning Brew the other day, and it was in my parents' house, and my dad's carers turned up halfway. They were supposed to get there like an hour earlier, and they turned up like halfway through the broadcast, and I had to go and answer the door for them. It was just like it wasn't optimal by any stretch of the imagination. But yeah, the fact that everyone said about this guy that he was going on about democracy, he's going about PR. Do you think that set back the whole let's get PR back on the agenda?
Because there are people opposed to it, it unfortunately allows them to then lump you with that idiot. So it's not helpful. It's really not helpful at all.
Well, being lumped in with idiots.
You know, I don't see why it should, in a major way, set back. You know, it doesn't change the arguments or anything like that. But yeah, it's never a good thing to be associated with idiots.
Yeah, yeah. There was a question in the chat about the from Katie. You said a few weeks ago to keep an eye on the polls for mid beds. What's the latest?
So the latest is, at the moment, if you were having to fill in your postal ballot, say, because you know the election isn't until next week, if you were having to fill in your postal ballot and because you were going to go on holiday, the tactical vote at the moment would be Labour. The only polls we have show that Labour are the best placed. The bookies have Labour as favourites. Now let's check the latest betting odds. I checked this yesterday.
John's saying the Lib Dems are throwing the kitchen sink at mid beds.
Yeah,
thinking they'll poll well.
So yeah, I mean, in terms of the betting odds at the moment, you're typically getting 1-1 for Labour. In other words, bet a quid will give you £2 back. It's like okay. Conservatives are like a little bit longer odds. I'm seeing like 3-2, 13-8. 3-2 is the best odds I'm seeing. That's from. I'm not advertising these actually. I won't say who they are. But like Lib Dems, I'm seeing 7-2, 3-1, 4-1, 3-1, 11-4. So you know the bookies think that Labour most likely. The actual by-election specific polls was obviously we know bookies odds are not a probability of winning. If lots of people try and put a bet, let's say on Labour, they'll shorten the odds because they just in case they lose, they don't want to pay out loads out. But in terms of the internal, like the specific by-election polling we've seen, the last one was showing Labour as being the most likely to win. The Lib Dems were nowhere. So whatever the Lib Dems are doing is not working, unless of course it's really just a con. And you think that Lib Dems are throwing the kitchen sink at it, but what they're actually doing, because you can be quite cunning with things like this. The Mid Bedfordshire will be made up, and I know it is made up. It's a really weird place when you look at it. They're made up of different areas, and some of those areas will be like Conservative areas. They will never flip their vote to Labour, but they might the Lib Dems. And there'll be other areas where they will go between the Conservatives and Labour. And for all I know, I don't know, someone local may have more of an inkling. It may be that what the Lib Dems are actually doing is campaigning hard in those areas where the Tories will flip to Lib Dems, but not Labour, and sort of staying away from the ones where Labour may be able to gain them. Because then what the Lib Dems are doing is taking Tory votes away, which is reducing their tally, which still helps. Now, I don't know. It might be that all three really are all going for it as if they're going to win. But on all the evidence you can see, there's not a scrap of evidence that the Lib Dems have a chance in hell.
Thanks to Johnny. Thanks to Johnny Copperhead for the £2 super chat. Took the 4s, he says. Nice bit of spoonerism there. And TMS is saying Green Party will be underestimated. I don't know about that. I wanted to talk to you briefly about our polling in this country. I've heard that in America, the polls are usually a bit out in the last few years because they tend to exclude younger voters because they're all done on landline phones, which younger people tend not to have anymore. We don't have a landline here in Durham. Are you? Is there a way that the pollsters in the UK do things differently? Do they get around that, or do you think that they might be?
Actually, interestingly, the only pollster that actually uses phones is Ipsos Mori, but they do tend to get decent results. But they're the only one. Everyone else uses the internet. It's online.
Right. So you think it's pretty accurate then? You think that these polls are pretty much bang on?
They're accurate enough in terms of what they'll say. Now, we know, for example, I mean, I'm looking at the YouGov ones right now, and they still have like reform. The interesting thing is the only one, like all of the online pollsters are massively inflating Reform UK share of the vote. So it's not that the share of the vote is necessarily, because I mean, here YouGov have got Reform UK on 8%. They're not getting 8% any day of the week. Whereas if you look at YouGov, I think the last one gave them something like 3% or something, which is much more reasonable. So there's any model that's used is going to have its problems. It's going to have its inaccuracies. What we want to know from it is, are they generally going to give us a good sense of what's going to happen in the general election? And yes, on balance, they are. YouGov and Ipsos Mori are pretty good for that. There's a few others that are not bad. I have to say, the two I will point out, like there are lots and lots of, in terms of the established posters, the two I would say for voting intention that are absolutely terrible are Delta Poll and Redfield and Wilton. And it made my heart sink when I was in a fringe event with talking about Brexit, and Stella Creasy was there, Labour MP, who's the chair of Labour Movement for Europe.
Who's
and
brilliant. We love Stella.
I asked them a question specifically about something that pollsters are getting wrong, that is acknowledged by independent statisticians that they're getting wrong. And I wanted to know if they were accounting for it. And the answer I basically got was a roundabout way of saying no. And I didn't want to ask follow-up questions because obviously other people want questions.
What was it that we're getting wrong? Sorry, Phil.
It's polling is really, really difficult to try and build up even something as simple, relatively simple as public opinion. You take a sample, you're not asking everyone in the country. So you have to know how representative each of the people contributing to the poll is of the country. And then you throw other things into the mix about how likely people are to vote, and all the rest of it gets very complicated. But what all the pollsters are getting wrong at the moment is they are still working on the assumption that of people who are likely to vote, 52% in 2016 voted Leave and 48% voted Remain. But way more people who voted Leave have died than those who voted Remain. So actually that's out. Not necessarily by enough to completely swing everything, but it is still out, and no one's really taking account of it. And it is not an easy thing to take account because you can't know exactly how many people who voted Leave have died and all the rest of it. But at the same time, the fact that they're not even attempting to means they're definitely, when it comes to like that sort of polling, they're definitely out. And then but Stella Creasy, in part of her answer, told me, "Oh, we use reliable pollsters." She says we use Delta Poll. At that point, I went, because no,
just no,
just no. But you know, there it is. I didn't say that to her again. I didn't want to waste more time when other people had questions.
But big thank you to Mark Stone there for the £5 super chat. Really appreciate that, mate. That's your first super chat. Yay. And then we've got Captain Bob Roberts saying, got 3 things to do at once, trying to do listen to the chat and everything else. And I know how you feel. I know how you feel, my friend. But yeah, we have Nick in the chat saying, great speech by Stella on Brexit. It's time the Labour leadership echoed her sentiment. And I was at an event last year with Stella Creasy when they were talking about Brexit, and one of the people on the panel, I've forgotten who it was, but they said, right, but there's no chance of us going back into the single market. There's no chance of us rejoining the customs union. And you sort of saw Stella, just going like this. Like,
I'll tell you what she did say though in this thing, which is quite interesting. It's like, because she was it's almost like backing up the Labour line in a way. In what she was saying is, so businesses right now want to know what Labour are going to do in the next 18 months. When they come to power, you've got like 18 months to save my business type of thing. We know since we left the single market and customs union, some businesses pretty much went under straight away. Some took longer. Some have been going under because of it. They just, it's all right saying adapt. It's like, well, if the EU won't buy my stuff, I'm going to adapt. Or if it now, if I try and send a consignment that's worth £40 and I've got to pay £80 certificate for it, how do I adapt to that? Well, Labour's answer to that is veterinary agreement. But what she said was, that's what, if you talk about, joining the EU or even just joining the single market or stuff like that, then you're talking like setting up a referendum. Well, she said setting up a referendum for like over 3 years. It's like, well, it didn't take 3 years last time, did it? But okay, no. You have got time to set that referendum. She said, even if we win, and she made that a big if. And it is a big if because we know that all the money will be on, against us. She said, then it'll be like 9 years to negotiate your way, which it probably would. Because if we had to join the EU, there's lots of things we have to change. And there are negotiations and tricky negotiations on the issue of currency, for example. It would take many years. And even if we just talk about a single market, then it's sort of similar negotiations, not with currency this time, but then with an extra few countries added on top as well, the EFTA countries. So, yeah, it would take many years. And these businesses in the meantime will be going, well, hang on a minute, this isn't, we can't last this long. At the same time, you can do both. It is possible to say in the short term, we're going to do this. But I'll tell you what was really exciting, what she said. And she said it with such a flourish that this is, although Labour haven't said it officially, they must be doing it. I have been talking this year about, if you want quick wins, because people keep saying things like, because they keep thinking in terms of like the EU or single market or customs union. And it's like, yeah, we need to get back into those. But people are behaving as if there's nothing we can do big that's not those things. And it's like, yeah, there's loads. And trade experts keep saying there's loads. And and I've done a few videos on this year. One massive one is the Pan-European Mediterranean Convention, which would basically mean not only with EU countries, but this involves like lots of countries in North Africa, in the Middle East, other non-EU countries. It means if we buy goods from them and use it in the production of our own goods, and we try and sell it into the single market, it will class. So like we get something from Morocco, we import some parts from Morocco, they will class as if they're made in Britain. So that then makes it way easier to meet rules of origin, which means much less likely to fall foul of tariffs. So something like that's huge. And Stella Creasy actually said, one of the first things she said was, and she said it as if no one in the room had heard of this thing, one thing you should be looking out for, Pan-European Mediterranean Convention. And she said it in such a way that got me thinking, yeah, she knows they're going to do that straight away.
Yeah. Well, funny you talk about that, because Richard Corbett, who was our last MEP, he was the Labour MEP, for Yorkshire, I think.
He was from Yorkshire, yeah.
And we interviewed him for Three Blokes in the Pub back in the day, in his home in Yorkshire. And he was telling me at the conference that the single market's not like you're either in or out. With Norway, for instance, they're like 99% in the single market because they have alignment. So essentially, so long as you make your goods and services to a certain standard, you can then have a trade, a little bit of added onto your trade deal to say, for this particular commodity, and obviously it's complex, takes a long time, but you can build up to a point where nearly everything that you sell is goes freely into the single market, and also that same commodity can come back into your country freely without these bloody tariffs.
I will say there is one spanner in the work that Richard probably wouldn't want to push, which is so Switzerland, for example, is a better way of describing this, because what they have is a load of these bilateral agreements.
Lots and lots.
And the EU hate it.
Yeah.
Switzerland are constantly trying to take the piss and trying to get out of certain obligations. They're doing it all the time. And it's like, do the UK have a history of taking the piss and trying to get out of obligations? So there would be...
Only in a limited and specific way, Phil. Limited and specific.
But there's a potential fly in the ointment in terms of trying to get a load of these things quite quickly, that we are seen as a bad faith actor, and the EU are already like, you try and tell people in the Parliament and the Commission things, oh, the UK wants to do what Switzerland's been doing, it, but no. So we'll have to see. Obviously, yes, there are things we can try and negotiate, and absolutely, like the way I look at it is this: is Labour cannot afford this Brexit bullshit. They can't afford it. They have to grow the economy. They have to help trade. There's no way of them winning future elections if they don't do that. So that means they have to be pragmatic. And what's the pragmatic solution? Re-entering the single market, re-establishing the customs union. Those things have to be part of the long-term planning, potentially even medium-term planning. So yeah, Labour will absolutely do things like this. And, the trick will be politically, as you say, it's not joining the single market. It's just like an agreement that takes the pressure off these goods and those goods and the other goods. And things like that will be part of Labour's plans.
Yeah.
Because they have to be.
They have to be, yeah, indeed. Just a big shout out to Captain Bart Roberts and to Andrew Greenland and to Lee Grote for the super chats. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it. And I think that the Tories wanted us to have divergence away from EU regulations because they're idealistic and stupid. And what they haven't realised is that in reality, Apple are not going to make a phone for the UK that still has their Thunderbolt connection or whatever it's called.
I mean, the latest take back control is from loads of British retailers saying that if we don't get busy, that the EU are introducing rules on not supporting things that have contributed to deforestation, for example, goods. And if we don't get on board, if we don't adopt exactly the same laws, a load of our products are just going to be banned in the EU because the EU are not going to accept. And it's like, so yeah, we actual British businesses, not just British-based ones, even British businesses are saying to the government, adopt this bloody EU law, will you? Because otherwise we can't sell our stuff. And this is happening all over the place. It's this idea, we're not going to be rule takers. Yes, we are, because we haven't made that rule. We haven't had British MEPs in the European Parliament deciding whether or not that's a good rule or not.
Yeah.
But we're going to follow it.
Yep.
So we are now. We used to be rule makers. Now we're rule takers.
I hated it when people said, "Oh, the EU's undemocratic." No, how is it undemocratic for the farmers? I was talking about this morning. The farmers of Walloon in Belgium, which didn't technically go for a government without a government for a year. I was informed afterwards. It meant that they couldn't make any new laws. It's not that nothing functions, okay, just to make that clear. But yeah, the fact that they held up the Canada-EU trade deal because it wasn't in their interest. They renegotiated the deal. The Walloon farmers said, yeah, that's good. And it went ahead. Because the EU didn't run on confrontation like the British system. It ran on consensus. And there were a few things where you needed the vote of absolutely every member for it to happen. Ascension to the EU is a really good example, and one of the things that really got on my wick about perhaps the Lexiteers more than the Brexiteers on the right was the one where they said, they've expanded to all these places around Europe, and we're exploiting people from Romania and stuff like this. And it's like, we pushed for that. Britain pushed for expansion and then moaned about it after the fact. And Britain did really well out of it. And we did have people coming over from Romania doing the work that British people, for whatever reason, didn't want to do as seasonal workers, which they've had to create new laws now to allow the same number of people to come over to pick fruit as before. And it's not as easy for people. So they're going to other countries to do it instead. And Yovash, thank you very much for the super chat there. As you said, the negotiations will be the hardest part of rejoining the EU. Also, reversing years of anti-EU propaganda. Better start right after the general election. I absolutely agree. But I mean, going back to something that we've talked about a lot on this show and on other shows, we need to get the press under control. We need Leveson too. Because we need to stop this. Who's the boogeyman today? Oh, it's the EU. Okay, who's the boogeyman tomorrow? Oh, it's trans people now. They're all bad, and it's constant scapegoating of all of our problems instead of addressing what the big problem is. The elephant in the room is the Tories have been in charge for the last 13 years, and they're not very good at the job.
Yeah. I mean, that is exactly it. It's. So someone's just advised another type of plaster. I've been sending off for lots of them. We're going to put these ones in as well, because why not? This is going to take weeks to heal.
Jupp says, to be fair, Phil, EU rules aren't there to benefit the EU, but every single member of the state.
Well, they
are based on compromise, and the rules benefit the UK. Shouldn't be too difficult anyway. Dan S, thank you very much for the super chat, mate. Hi, said hi to Graham at the EU rally. Hi, Dan. As someone in tech, I'd love to see NHS have open source code people could contribute to. Would be revolutionary. Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, I used to contribute to sort of. Do you remember when they did the Large Hadron Collider?
Yes.
At home. Do you remember that LHC at home? And you could give some of your processing power from your computer.
You do that
to help
for
them.
SETI as well.
Yes, they do. The search for extraterrestrial intelligence, which is, I mean, that's pretty cool. And sort of crowdsourcing, I think, is a really, really good plan, because it allows people who want to help, because I think there's millions of people out there at the moment who just feel a bit helpless. They don't feel like they can contribute anything to make things better. And I just want to come to a point that was made in the chat there about Labour. Obviously, I want to rejoin the EU, and Labour's not pushing for that at the moment. But I feel like we are in a pit. We are in an absolute pit at the moment in this country. Our economy hasn't grown in 16 years. We have the 8 million people on waiting lists for the NHS. Our infrastructure is crumbling. Our schools are crumbling. Everything is going to shit. And Labour is the only ladder out of that pit. And it's not perfect. You know, you might get some splinters on the way up, but it's the only way out. And we can't be precious about this. People are going to die if the Tories have another 5 years. But many people have already died.
Yes.
Thousands of people under their misrule between, you know, the terrible
between austerity. And COVID, it's difficult to know exactly how many extra, because there would have been deaths caused by COVID. It's difficult to say how many extra deaths, but you are talking, if you consider the number of austerity deaths, well in excess of 200,000 deaths due to Tory.
Yeah,
at least.
But imagine just being in this pit and going, "Oh, do you know what? Unless that ladder is gold plated, I'm not going to climb it." You're like, no, just get up the ladder, get out, and then I think we can have some constructive criticism. Because at the moment, I don't feel like any, you know, criticism of the way Labour are handling things at the moment. If it was the case that it was destroying their lead in the polls, I would be very vocal about stick. You know, they're doing it wrong. They're doing it wrong. They're doing it wrong. Which it was when they were under Corbyn, because they were consistently behind in the polls. Yeah. They were heading towards electoral disaster. And so, yeah, I was very vocal saying they should change their ways. Now I'm sort of just, I feel like just kind of holding my tongue a little bit. Thanks to Robolos in the chat there for this £20 super chat, and also thanks to George. We do not have a free press, says George, which is very true. Sorry, Phil, what are you going to say on that?
I was just going to say, you know, in terms of the, I keep trying to describe to people as being like a bus. It's like, look, the Tories have got this bus and you're welcome to get on it, and it's going in completely the wrong direction to where you want to go to. Labour have got this bus and they're saying you can get on, and we're going in the direction you want to go. Now, they haven't stated the destination you want, but it's in that direction. So what do? You get on it. Now, if at any point that bus stops and won't go any further or tries to go in a different direction, you can get off the bus. But in the here and now, anyone who wants to rejoin the EU, or there might be some people who just want to rejoin the customs union or the single market or both, and not the EU, whatever. If you want to go at all in that direction, the Labour have the bus going in that direction. The Tories have the one going further away.
Yeah.
So the plan for some of these people is to get on the bus going further away and wait for a bus that goes exactly where they want to go and as far as they want to go. But they're going to start from further back if it ever turns up at all. Whereas why not get yourself closer there? Yeah. And then you can, as I say, if at any point in the future, Labour are not going in that direction, you can say, well, I'm going to get off then.
Yeah. But also, I mean, it's letting the perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yes, yeah.
And also, we have no communication with the Tory party, you and me, and everyone watching this, unless you are a lord or a lady, or you were born a multi-millionaire and you went to the right school, you have no connection with the Tory party. They will not listen to you. I mean, a lot of the MPs don't even turn up to the MP surgeries. They let the staff do that. You know, they can't be asked. They don't care about you. They don't care about me. They care about anyone but themselves and feathering their own nest. Labour, at least we have a line of communication with Labour. At least we can talk to our Labour MPs. And all the Labour MPs I've ever met have been incredibly approachable and willing to discuss these things, whereas the Tories just shut you down. So it's the question of what do you want? Do you want a two-way conversation, or do you just want to be screaming at the telly for the rest of your life? So yeah, that's the way I look at it. But yeah, Gary's saying all public computer systems are usually years out of date.
Yeah.
That's quite true. But then again, I mean, when you look at the sort of how fast things progressed between, let's say, 1979 and 1995 with computers, it was just every 6 months it was a new revolution. But then since the birth of the internet, I mean, we still use Amazon, we still use Google. It's not that different from when it started. Obviously, it's bigger now. But I'm thinking of like social media. We had MySpace, and that sort of faded away under Facebook. Now we've had Facebook now for 15 years, more than 15 years. It's not. The speed of that change seems to have slowed down a bit. So I don't know if it matters so much if things are a few years after.
It does if it can't handle. Because what happens is, like with a computer, like for example, when the last college I worked at full time, we had these netbooks because I taught in the course where there's a lot of research needs to do, so they have these netbooks, and they were absolutely brilliant. When I first started teaching there, they were relatively new, only a couple of years old. And then by the time I was beating the principal's door down to buy me new ones, they weren't working. They were taking 10 minutes to load in. It's no good for students. like, and all the rest of it. And the reason is because what happens is you get an update and then you get another update, and all of these updates over years take more and more processing power. And then all of a sudden, your computer that used to be fine and run fine is now a potato. So, because the operating systems and the other apps you've got on it are capable of more and more and more. It demands more and more of the processor. So you do need better ones. And, the fact that they're still, and things like the NHS still using XP, for example, it's not even supported by Microsoft. So it's not even secure.
The NHS still uses XP?
I think so.
That's disgraceful.
I think it still uses a really old version of Excel as well. I don't think they even have a Microsoft Office subscription.
They should say, to Microsoft, we're going to make you give us the latest operating system for free for the NHS, or we're going to tax you properly.
Well,
it's up to you. What would be cheaper?
Well, no, the government should just tax them properly and then use.
I know, but use that money to pay for the rollout for the NHS. That would be good. Hang on a sec. Banks are not allowed under law to use unsupported software, both here in the US.
Well, it would be really serious. Imagine doing that for the NHS. Oh, just coincidentally, I'm sure this is a complete coincidence. Like, we had the news recently, didn't we, that more of our personal data's gone, has gone to someone it shouldn't have done from the NHS.
Oh, not again.
Again, do you think that might be to do with the fact that we're not using very secure systems, up-to-date systems? Yeah, I mean, I don't know, but it's our medical data should be secure.
Yeah. There was a comment in the chat about the delegates in the Labour Party conference not being from CLPs but being from business. 50% of the delegates are from trade unions in the Labour. We know we were there, but yeah. Martin Jones says
cheeky there to me. It says, how much RAM did they have? Do the abacuses have in my day, Phil? I'll have you know, in my junior school, we learned how to use an abacus.
Oh wow!
But we did also have, there were such a thing as pocket calculators, and they were sort of much bulkier than they are now. But we learned how to use an abacus. I don't know whether that was our teacher just taking the piss or what, but we did learn how to use.
I think we learned how to use an abacus, but it was just one of those sort of fun lessons.
But we also learned programming, which they don't. Well, I think they're trying to start again. But then Margaret Thatcher said, "Oh no, we don't need programming lessons," and then we went from being a competitor on the world stage in computing to not. Another coincidence, another Tory coincidence there.
They're good at that, aren't they? Taking something good and making it shit. Martin's saying it's not the price of the software, it's the cost of rolling out software across the estate. But then again, I mean, everything's downloadable now. I've just updated my Adobe suite.
Wow. I think they'll mean from that. I don't know. For whatever reason, though, and there's lots of things in the NHS that are complete shambles. I mean, for example, a few years ago, when I was having blood tests done by my GP, and because I was going to have some elective surgery by the hospital as well, and they were both doing blood tests in the same week, and it was like, it should have been possible for whoever did it first, for then whoever wanted it second, to just log on. Then my GP is my doctor. This, the hospital in Hull was also, had me effectively on their books. They should have just been logged into a common system and be able to find the results instead of just taking blood from me again, which wastes time. It wastes my time going in. It wastes their time. Someone needs to do that. That's poor productivity when you've got severe shortages of nurses.
Well, I think it's still mad that police officers still seem to be using notepads, and then they go home and write up the note, go back to the station and write up the notes. What a waste of time. Just what someone mentioned in the chat earlier, I think it was it Vendetta, Master Templar. Have you seen the Liz Kendall speech? Yes. Sorry, I watched it when after the show this morning because it was suggested that I watch it. So she was talking about getting people working, and this was going to be a big push for Labour. She didn't really. I found it a bit short of content in what they plan to do to get people working, because obviously the Tories have got it in their head that they want to there's 5 million people of working age who aren't working at the moment. There's lots of people who are suffering from mental health problems after the pandemic, an increase after the pandemic, and this idea that they're going to get them back to work, the Tories are going to get back to work by cutting their benefits if they don't go back to work, which I see as draconian, disgusting. I'm just going to add to stress anyway, if you're already suffering from anxiety, if you're already suffering from depression, this is not going to help. It's the worst thing they could possibly do. I'm hoping that Labour's policy is going to be like it was with the New Deal for musicians, where it's a top up. So you can work X many hours a week and you won't lose your benefits if you do that. Because at the moment, you work at all, you lose your benefits. You've got to go through a load of paperwork and nonsense, and you've got to get to your appointments at the job centre on time. If you don't get to those appointments on time because you're relying on public transport, or you have to walk because you haven't got a car, because you haven't got a job, because you haven't got much money, you lose your benefits. It's horrible. It's a horrible.
The current system of having like quotas to sanction people has to be ended immediately. But even in terms of this, you can work so many hours and so on. They need to make sure that they're not trying to catch people out. There was a case in the news a few weeks ago. I think it was a woman who was asked, and like you're constantly asked, how many hours you're working, and she put 16, not realizing that's the cutoff, and then she had all her benefits stopped. And the bugger of it is, she doesn't even work 16 hours. She works 15 and a half hours a week, but she was just thinking, oh, what's half an hour? She just put 16 down a bit glibly, not realizing that's the cutoff. Had everything stopped, and it's like, and she only realized, no one told her, she only realized when she went out shopping and there's no money in her account. So things like that have just to stop, because things like that, even what you might think is a temporary loss of funds. And by the way, I bet she doesn't. It'll be an absolute nightmare to get it turned on again. Like they'll turn it off at the drop of a hat and turn it on again. Is a bugger. So
it's not a bug. It's
things like that have to stop. It has to be sort of worked on the basis of making sure that this person's put it down. So not trying to catch people out.
TMS has said Starmer said nothing on ... but he's saying reforming holiday entitlements calculation and how employers are exploiting it. I mean, there's a lot of issues that Labour might not have mentioned or had a policy on, but I stick with what Phil said about like they're going in the right direction. Once we're on that bus, we can start making a fuss about this stuff and bringing it to their attention and saying this needs sorting out. But it doesn't matter if we bring it to their attention at the moment. It doesn't matter if they make, say some platitudes or some staring rhetoric about it, because they're not in power and it won't change anything. Once they're in power, it will actually change things. And Plumduff saying what sort of cruel system punishes the disabled. R1, there is a definite disability tax in this country if you are disabled.
Because absolutely everything, every squeeze they ever put on will always hit disabled people. They'll try and squeeze money here, squeeze money there, and wherever they do it, it's always going to be hit on disabled people. So, for example, when even something like when the energy bills went massively up, well, if you've got people who's poor blood circulation or something like that, have to have an electric heater or something like that around. That's electricity. They can't just stop using that. There's but everything they do, like at the moment, there's various schemes. They're trying to work out. First of all, they're trying to work out how to pay for the increase in the state pension to maintain the triple lock, and also trying to work out how to do tax cuts. You've got all sorts of horrible things being talked about, like, oh, should we not increase benefits in line with inflation? So that will then immediately hit disabled people. Or the fact that you've got, you have stupid things. You have like, if someone's got Down syndrome and they'll keep checking every 3 years to check if they've still got Down syndrome.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, no, my chromosomes have sorted themselves out now. Thank you very much.
Cystic fibrosis. Is your cystic fibrosis cleared up?
Yeah, that's genetic.
And you're like, I was born with it. Like, how could you? It is, the system at the moment is set up to make life as unpleasant as possible for people who are already living with physical and mental health problems.
The Tories work on the basis that the only way to sort out malingerers is to make it as difficult as possible to get something, because only then they think the people who will need it will go through all the hoops because they need it, and that the people who are skiving, they'll see it's too much effort and just go to work. That's how they think. That's their mindset.
Yeah. They see it as an incentive to spend half your life filling out bloody forms for your £58 a week. And that's an incentive to what? Start your own business? Become an entrepreneur? What's an incentive for except to waste the short time that you have on this planet filling out freaking forms? charging up the wall. Someone said in the chat then that they're actually giving in they're giving incentives to say no to people. They
Yeah.
get bonuses if they
And
say
if you're
no.
thinking, if you've got these people, right, here's what I would say. If you've got all these people go, oh, you just spend it on fags and Netflix and stuff like that. Okay, then, right. So build apartments, social housing. You build social housing. And if there's people who need care, you could even, have like communities of people who are going to have long-term problems.
Yeah,
House them there, provide the support they need. You send them groceries and things like that. Have a community sort of grocery store where they could just use. You fund all that, right?
yeah,
Just so that they can have a nice, decent standard of living, good quality housing, fresh food, the care that they need. You could do all this really efficiently. And why don't you do that then?
yeah.
They
But
don't
to
want
have
to do
rich
that.
people saying, "Oh well, you can't give handouts to the poor. It just makes them lazy," and it's just it's a horrible way of looking at at
Well,
your
I want
fellow
more people
humans.
looking at how much money we give to rich scroungers.
Yes,
Just
very good
compare
point.
the amount of money that's spent on
Yeah,
benefits with the amount that's spent on massive tax breaks.
yeah, absolutely.
People who are incredibly rich.
My heart goes out to Michael in the chat there saying, I have cancer and I have to work 40 plus hours a week as I can't afford to live otherwise.
Mm.
I'm really sorry to hear that, Michael. And you're getting some love in the chat there. It's an absolute disgrace. And this is, again, another reason why we need the Tories out. And I don't care that the ladder's not gold plated and they're not doing exactly what I want them to do about Europe or about foreign domestic policy, whatever. Just need these Tories out as soon as possible. So people like Martin are looked after properly instead of
Uh,
just
yeah.
being
Be real
left.
saying that no community housing is not grouped together is not the way UBI is the way. Yes, I agree. But what I'm saying is they don't even come up with that. If they're saying, their argument is
Sorry, Michael.
oh, they'll just spend it on fags and Netflix. If you say UBI, they'll say the same thing. What I am saying is why don't you fund this then?
Yeah.
Because then they would get everything they need.
Yeah.
But they won't. What I'm
No.
trying to say is you have to come up with arguments that block their bullshit.
Yeah. We've got I was reading this. My feed keeps popping. I'm trying to read one and it keeps moving. Alan says the main problem with NHSIT is that there's no standardization of applications, so it's a nightmare for junior doctors who move around all the time. They need to learn several systems each time, which doesn't sound great. Wasn't there a big rollout of IT under Labour, and it was a bloody disaster for the
They always
NHS?
are. Rollouts of major new systems are always a disaster. At the end of the day, it's always the case. It's absolutely all the case. As long as you do it in tandem with the old ones, you don't just have a big turn off and on. It's fine. You sort out your problems, and then a few years later, it's all working. That will always be the case. Can't help it.
Fair enough. Mark says, if too much money makes you lazy, let's save Nepo babies from laziness. I know it's like, people won't work if they're just given stuff. All these people in charge of this country were given £1 million on their 18th birthday. Like nearly all of them to a man. And they've decided to become entrepreneurs. They've decided to become politicians. They've decided to become elite sportsmen and women. Yeah, they were given that money and they didn't just go, oh, I'm just going to sit on the couch and play PlayStation, because people don't. People like working, or at least they like doing stuff that they feel is making a difference and that they enjoy doing. People don't enjoy doing crappy jobs that could be automated. So I don't see the point of work for the point of work, for the sake of work, I should say. So that just goes back to sort of the communist era when they would have in the Soviet Union, where they would have people dig a hole one day and then fill it in the next day, just so they had something to do. And I think that's just a bad way of running
always makes
society.
me laugh when and you've had this ever since the 60s. Not that I was around for the 60s, but I've seen Old Tomorrow's World. But all the time you get this thing, oh, we'll be doing this thing, then you'll be and technology will allow you to put your feet up and you'll just be able to live a life of leisure. And it's like, no, you won't. What'll happen is you'll get less money because you're not you're not providing that productivity. Now, UBI absolutely at some point is going to be politically necessary, because there's going to come a point where there's going to be it's like at the moment with the cost of living crisis, there's a critical mass of people suffering to the point where the Tories have basically blown it now. That's it. They're finished. The same thing will happen in the future because so much will be automated. Because the next thing, we've already had a lot of automation over the last few hundred years of like manual jobs. The automation now with AI is going to be on other jobs like clerical jobs, even middle management. You know, you could have AI do a decent job potentially of being a middle manager better than an actual, because all they have to do is sort out like holidays and stuff, you know, so you can get AI to do that. So it's going to feed up the sort of the level, the tiers of society that are going to be affected by automation of their jobs. And there will come a point where there is a critical mass of people who just say, well, look, you know, we're going to need some form of universal income. We're going to need this world that's been promised to us for decades, where technology allows us to basically put our feet up with only a little bit of work needed. You know, we've already gone down to like standard working week is 5 days. There's parts of the country that are doing 4-day, where for public service jobs, you're doing 4-day working weeks for the same money. That'll just have to keep going down, has to, because you're going to end up with so many jobs over the next few decades becoming automated.
Just to jump into the chat, we've got Liebshin there saying, I have Asperger's. I would love nothing more than to have a full-time job, but I've not been able to find suitable employment in over 10 years. And that's awful. I mean, that's because we've had the Tories in charge and they aren't interested in actually helping you. They just want to take things away. They just want to try and, you know, belittle you and make you feel worthless. That's what they want to do to everyone who's not, you know, they didn't go to school with, presumably. And I'm really sorry that you're going through that. And I mean, for me, I think that there are clear ways to make things better for people, and we're just not getting them from the Tories in any way, shape, or form. And I'd like to see Labour help people more rather than just punish them. Be a lot more carrot than stick, especially as you say, like, what about the rich scroungers? What about the rich people who do nothing, contribute nothing, and literally contribute nothing because all they do is you know, call themselves non-doms, and they pay, is it £20,000 or £30,000 a year?
I can't remember, but either way, they're gone. There's no such thing as there's no such thing as non-doms in so many countries around the world, including like America. They don't have it, do they?
No.
So, you know, we're just getting rid of what was always like an upper class tax break. It's bad enough, you know, with the middle class tax breaks. You do have to be a little bit careful with those because they vote. Although the VAT on schools one has been comprehensively lost by the right-wing media. The public are well on board for VAT on school fees. But upper class tax breaks, unless there's an actual economic benefit, no, you can get rid of all of those because that's not going to lose your votes.
Emma Price, thank you very much for the super chat, Emma. I, for my sins, worked for PIP, the most soul-destroying job. The system is ridiculous, and the cost does not equal any savings made from the tiny minority not entitled. The system needs scrapping. Yeah, I absolutely agree. For a system where people get so little money anyway, the fact that maybe a handful of people will take the piss for so little money, who cares? I just don't care, especially when the government, how much is it that Labour are hoping to claw back from the COVID corruption? It's 7.2 billion.
Well, there's lots of different pockets. There is a 7-odd billion in terms of like that type of fraud. Whether we claw it all back is another thing, but you'd certainly get a good amount of it back for not much money. All you have to do is hire some extra investigators and this commissioner. Even if you pay them 150 grand a year or whatever, you know, it's that they'll always pay for themselves. You know, tax collectors always pay for themselves.
Yeah.
But it's like, you know, you'll see charts every now and then about the amount of benefit fraud, and that's always chased up, and it's fine, you know, fraud. But then you look at tax fraud, that runs into like 200 billion a year.
Yeah.
Like, why?
And that's the illegal stuff. You've also got the legal tax avoidance.
No, we're talking about actual tax fraud.
If you count down on tax avoidance as well, it'll be multiples of that figure. I mean, just there's what we should be concentrating on, and I don't think that demonizing the poor should ever come into it. Unfortunately, we live in the UK in 2023. But it is going to take a long time for the,
It does
for the
take
Tories
absolutely.
to,
Even if you
to
can
fix
come
the
in
problems left by the
like
Tories.
Liz Kendall, who is going to be, assuming everything stays as it is, the Minister for Work and Pensions. She could go in straight away, wave the wand, and says, we know that you've been given quotas to sanction people. That's not happening. You're only going to sanction for it. But in terms of what you can get sanctioned for, it would still take time to because she can't just come in and just change that overnight, because she's going, well, hopefully they're doing some of this in advance. She'd have to make sure that they've thought it all through. So changes will take time to come through. Sometimes it will need legislation, which means parliamentary time as well. So it takes a long time to make some of these changes, even though there are some things they can come in straight away and say, yeah, she can go in straight away, for example, and say, do you know what? If someone's got something like, cerebral palsy or Down syndrome or something, in a few years' time, they've still got it. Can you not waste everyone's time with that?
Yeah, exactly. Oh,
And can you not? And can you not? The other thing, the big thing is, you do not get someone on minimum wage working at a job centre saying that they can judge someone's fitness to work better than the doctor.
Yes.
You scrap that immediately.
These are things that Labour can do on day one, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is not. Yeah. So it's a hell of a list, though, isn't it? All the things they're going to have to do when they get in.
Yeah.
Which is not certain, but it's looking good. It's looking good.
Yeah, it is.
Fingers crossed.
From their point of view, from the point of view of Labour MPs, of course they can't be complacent. They've got to be on it all the time. I can be complacent as I like. I am sat in the stands watching my team winning 10-0 with like 10 minutes to go.
And then it all goes horribly wrong. Okay, well, thank you very much, Phil, for chatting with me this afternoon, and thanks to everyone in the actual chat there. Thanks for the super chats as well. It's really generous. And Emma was saying that she followed up that statement about working for PIP, saying that it really affected their mental health, and I'm really not surprised, and I'm really sorry that a system that you would think, oh well, I'll go and help people who are suffering, help people who are disabled, help people who need the safety net, and you spend the whole time cutting more holes in the safety net.
Yeah,
it's like. It's painful. Anyway, we will be back at 9 o'clock tonight for the Labour Social. So if you'd like to join us for that, if you're still watching, please join us. And Phil, will you be there tonight, or are you?
No, I'm out
doing
tonight. Risking more injuries, but I have to go tonight.
Okay, all right. Have you got new shoes though? That's the important thing.
I've got old shoes that are fine. It's the new shoes that were the problem. Not that they were new. I keep saying, my partner, my birthday last year, got me two pairs of boots, and one of them was absolutely nice. They were lovely and everything, but they didn't go with the suit. And then this other one, which I hadn't had cause to wear recently, so I thought I'll wear those. And I don't know why she got me two pairs of boots, because I've only got one pair of feet. But there it is. That's women for you. But yes, they and what'll have happened is she'll have made me wear them. And I'll have probably thought, oh, they're not very comfortable, but I'll probably just wear them in.
Yeah.
And in actual fact, they just didn't fit. They were just terrible.
Anyway, all right.
Lesson learned.
Lesson learned. John's just been in the chat to say he's DJing tonight, unfortunately. So it's just going to be me. Join me at 9 o'clock tonight, and maybe some randoms if I'm lucky. And we'll be discussing the news of the week, and obviously we'll have to talk a little bit about the situation in the Middle East, because it's kind of unavoidable at this point, and we shouldn't necessarily stay silent on it, like one of the Murdoch press was saying. Oh, we shouldn't have an opinion on it at all. I'm like, well, I don't think that's quite the right way to look at it at the moment. But we'll talk about that tonight. So until then, thank you very much for watching. Thanks for all the chats and the super chat. And until next time, I'll say hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.